They probably told you that you were too much, too sensitive, too emotional, too quiet, too intense, too easily hurt. Maybe you learned early to apologize for how deeply you felt. Maybe you learned to shrink your reactions, to soften your voice, to hide your tears, to swallow your questions. And somewhere along the way, you started believing something was wrong with you. But what if nothing was wrong? What if the very thing that made life harder for you as a child is the same thing that makes you powerful as an adult? What if your sensitivity was never a weakness, but an advanced nervous system trying to survive in a world that didn't know how to hold it? Let's talk about the advantage nobody explained to you. A highly sensitive and gifted child doesn't just notice the world, they absorb it. They feel the temperature of a room emotionally. They sense tension before words are spoken. They pick up meaning in tone, posture, silence. They understand patterns that others overlook. Their mind is fast. Their heart is open. Their nervous system is tuned finely like a high-precision instrument. But here's the problem. That kind of wiring requires safety. And most children did not grow up with emotional safety. So instead of being protected, they adapted. They became the child who didn't cause trouble, the child who understood the adults, the child who carried feelings that weren't theirs, the child who matured too early. They learned to read moods to stay safe. They learned to perform calm to avoid conflict. They learned to be useful, agreeable, impressive, invisible, or exceptional, not because they wanted attention, but because their nervous system was searching for stability, and that early adaptation becomes misunderstood as fragility. But look deeper, that same child develops extraordinary emotional intelligence, deep empathy, a creativity, a moral sensitivity, strong intuition, the ability to connect dots others miss, and the capacity to sit with pain without turning away. They become adults who can understand people without being told much. They can feel what is unsaid. They can create beauty from chaos. They can turn suffering into meaning. They are often the healers, the artists, the writers, the therapists, the leaders who lead quietly but deeply, the ones who change rooms without raising their voice. Their pain sharpened their perception. Their survival strategy became their gift. But here is the truth no one told you. Your sensitivity was never meant to be used only for survival. It was meant for living. It was meant for connection, for truth, for creativity, for leadership that doesn't dominate but understands, for strength that doesn't shout but holds. When a sensitive child grows into an adult who learns safety, something extraordinary happens. They stop scanning for danger. They start choosing meaning. They stop managing everyone else's emotions. They start honoring their own. They stop apologizing for depth. They start using it. And what once felt like a burden becomes an advantage. You don't numb easily. You don't lie to yourself easily. You don't tolerate emptiness easily. You are built to feel life fully. That is not weakness. That is rare strength. 5 important practical steps to turn sensitivity into strength. Number 1 is learn to separate your feelings from others' feelings. When you grow up highly sensitive, your nervous system learns a dangerous kind of loyalty. It learns to merge. Before you learn to read words, you learn to read emotional weather. A tightening in a parent's jaw, a heaviness in the room, a silence that felt loud. You learn that survival depended on knowing what others felt before they said it. So your body became alert. Your attention turned outward. Your safety began to depend on managing what was around you. Over time, this skill stopped feeling like a skill. It became identity. You didn't just notice emotions, you absorbed them. Anxiety walked into the room and your chest tightened. Anger appeared and your stomach contracted. Sadness hovered near someone you loved and suddenly it lived inside you too. Not because you were weak, because your system was trained to protect connection at any cost. A sensitive child learns something quietly. If I feel what they feel, maybe I can keep them calm. If I carry it, maybe they won't fall apart. If I hold it, maybe I will be safe. So you became the container. You learned to confuse empathy with responsibility. You mistook attunement for duty. You started believing that other people's discomfort was somehow yours to solve. This is how emotional boundaries dissolve, not through selfishness, but through love without protection. As an adult, this pattern continues in subtle ways. You feel guilty when someone else is unhappy. You explain other people's behavior before they ever apologize. You carry tension that did not originate in your body. You sense disappointment even when no one names it. You apologize when nothing was wrong. You feel exhausted after conversations that were not yours to carry. And slowly, without noticing, you begin living in emotional crowds. Your inner world becomes noisy, heavy, unclear. You don't know where you end and others begin. Separating your feelings from others' feelings is not coldness. It is the beginning of honesty. It starts with noticing the moment emotion enters you, not judging it, not pushing it away, simply observing it. This tightness in my chest, did it begin when I entered this room? This sadness, did it exist in me before this conversation? This anxiety, does it belong to my history or to the person in front of me? These questions gently return you to yourself. At first, it feels uncomfortable, even frightening, because your nervous system was taught that distance equals danger. That saying, "This is not mine," means abandonment. That boundaries mean disconnection. But the truth is the opposite. When you stop carrying what is not yours, you don't become less loving. You become more real. You listen without disappearing. You care without collapsing. You support without self-betrayal. You discover that compassion does not require self-erasure, and something subtle changes inside your body. Your shoulders lower, your breath deepens, your thoughts slow. You are no longer on constant emotional patrol. You begin to feel a new kind of strength, quiet, grounded, steady. Not the strength of control, but the strength of presence. You realize you can be with someone's pain without becoming it. You can witness sorrow without drowning in it. You can love deeply without bleeding invisibly. This is how sensitivity becomes wisdom instead of burden, not by closing your heart, but by finally giving it a home of its own. Number 20. Build safety inside your body. For a highly sensitive and gifted child, danger was rarely something dramatic. It was often invisible. A tone that changed without warning, a room that went quiet too fast, a face that looked present but wasn't emotionally there, love that felt conditional, care that depended on being easy, impressive, quiet, or useful. So your body learned something long before your mind could understand it. The world is unpredictable. Stay ready. Your nervous system became a guard, always scanning, always listening, always preparing. Even in moments that looked calm, your body stayed slightly braced, shoulders lifted, jaw tight, breath shallow. Muscles prepared for impact that never fully came, but also never fully stopped being expected. This is what people miss when they talk about sensitivity. It is not just emotional. It is biological. Your heart learned to beat faster before your thoughts could catch up. Your stomach learned to tighten before you could reason. Your chest learned to hold breath as a form of protection. You did not choose this. Your body chose survival, so now, years later, even in safe rooms with kind people, with no visible threat, your system may still behave as if something bad is about to happen. You call it anxiety. You call it overthinking. You call it being dramatic, but it is simply an old intelligence that has not yet learned that the war is over. Building safety inside your body is not about positive thinking. It is about teaching your nervous system a new truth. This moment is different from the past. And the body does not learn through words. It learns through experience, through slow breath that is allowed to finish, through silence that does not lead to punishment, through rest that is not followed by guilt, through stillness that is not dangerous. At first, safety feels strange, even uncomfortable. When your body has lived in alertness, calm can feel empty, peace can feel boring, slowness can feel unsafe. You may notice that when things get quiet, your mind looks for problems. When life becomes stable, you feel restless. When love becomes gentle, you question it. Not because you like chaos, but because chaos is familiar. Your system learned to measure love by intensity, to recognize care through tension, to feel alive only when something is wrong. So building safety becomes an act of re-education. You begin with small things, letting your shoulders drop when you notice them lifted, exhaling fully instead of stopping halfway, sitting without needing to justify it, eating without rushing, walking without checking your phone. These are not small acts. They are signals. They tell your body, I am not being chased. You also learn to choose environments differently. You step away from constant noise, from people who live in crisis, from conversations that feel like emotional emergencies, from relationships where love must be earned daily, not because you are weak, But because your nervous system is honest, it cannot pretend safety. It either feels it or it doesn't. And slowly, something begins to soften. Your sleep deepens, your reactions slow, your thoughts become less sharp, edged, your chest feels wider, your emotions move through instead of getting stuck. You start responding instead of reacting. You notice the difference between danger and discomfort. You stop living as if every feeling is an emergency. This is when sensitivity transforms, not into numbness, but into clarity. You still feel deeply, but your feelings are no longer alarms. They become information. You become present without being overwhelmed, open without being flooded, kind without being drained. Your body becomes a place you can live in, not a battlefield you must manage, and that is real safety. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of enough calm inside you that pain no longer defines the whole story. Number 3 is stop proving your worth through usefulness. When you were young, love may not have been something you simply received. It was something you learned to earn, not through who you were, but through what you provided. You noticed early on that your presence alone did not always create calm, but your usefulness did. When you were quiet, helpful, mature, understanding, impressive, accommodating, the room softened. The tension lowered, the adults relaxed, conflict paused. So your nervous system made a quiet decision. This is how I stay connected. You became valuable by being easy. You became safe by being needed. You became lovable by being convenient. And slowly usefulness replaced worth. You learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken, to offer solutions before anyone asked, to carry responsibilities that were not meant for your age, to become the emotional glue, the translator, the peacekeeper, the reliable one. People praised you for it. They called you mature, strong, selfless, wise beyond your years, but no one asked what it cost you. No one noticed that you were learning to disappear in service. As an adult, this pattern often becomes invisible. You help automatically. You over-explain. You over-give. You stay when it hurts. You tolerate what drains you. You fix what is not yours to repair. You apologize for existing loudly. You feel uneasy when you have nothing to offer. Rest makes you uncomfortable. Receiving feels awkward. Saying no feels like betrayal. Being ordinary feels dangerous, because somewhere inside, a younger part of you still believes, if I stop being useful, I will stop being loved. So you keep probing, through work, through emotional labor, through loyalty that hurts, through availability that empties you, through patience that costs your health, through silence that protects others at your expense. And the world rewards this until it doesn't. Until you are exhausted, until your body starts to ache for reasons doctors cannot explain, until resentment quietly grows, until you realize you are surrounded by people who benefit from you, but do not truly see you. Stopping this pattern is not laziness, it is grief. It means grieving the childhood where you had to be valuable instead of protected, and it means feeling the sadness of realizing you were needed more than you were held. It means admitting that some love in your life was conditional and calling that what it was painful and incomplete. Learning that your worth is inherent, not earned, feels foreign to a nervous system trained in performance. At first, doing less feels dangerous. Saying no feels selfish. Rest feels wrong. Letting someone be disappointed in you feels unbearable. But slowly, with practice, something changes. You notice that some people leave when you stop over giving. You notice that some relationships shrink when you stop carrying all the weight. And you notice something else too. Some people stay. Some connections deepen. Some love becomes quieter but realer. You begin to experience a new kind of dignity. Not the dignity of being needed, but the dignity of being allowed to be human, to be tired, to be unsure, to be quiet, to be imperfect, to be ordinary. You learn to sit with the uncomfortable truth. I do not need to earn my place. I do not need to justify my existence. I do not need to be useful to be worthy. And from that place, something gentle is born. Choice. You help when you want to, not when you are afraid. You give because your heart is full, not because it is trying to survive. You love without bargaining. You rest without apology. You take up space without explanation. And the child inside you finally learns, I am not valuable because I carry everyone. I am valuable because I exist, and that is enough. Number 4 is that choose environments that respect depth. As a sensitive child, You did not struggle because you were fragile. You struggled because you were deep in a shallow world. Your nervous system was designed to notice layers, emotion beneath words, meaning beneath behavior, truth beneath performance. You felt things that had no language yet. You sensed when something was off, even when everyone else called it fine. You asked questions that made rooms uncomfortable. You paused where others rushed. You felt moved by things people barely noticed, and slowly, you learned that this way of being was inconvenient. You were told you think too much. You feel too much. You care too much. You take things too seriously. So you adapted. You learned to make your depth smaller. You hid your questions behind jokes. You turned intensity into politeness. You learned to speak lightly about heavy things. You pretended you were simple so others would stay comfortable, not because you were wrong, but because you were alone in your way of seeing. As an adult, this loneliness often continues, not from lack of people, but from lack of resonance. You can be surrounded and still unseen. You can be successful and still feel empty. You can be in relationships and still feel quietly misunderstood, because depth requires matching. And many environments are built for speed, surface noise, and performance. Places where emotions are inconvenient, where silence is awkward, where vulnerability is mocked, where complexity is rushed into slogans, where pain is treated like weakness, where listening is replaced by fixing. In such spaces, your nervous system never fully rests. You become slightly guarded, you simplify yourself, you hold back thoughts, you translate your inner world into something easier to digest, and over time, this self-editing becomes exhausting. You may call it introversion, or social fatigue, or anxiety, but often it is grief for not being met where you live internally. Choosing environments that respect depth is not about becoming elitist or isolating. It is about biological compatibility. Just as some plants require shade and others require full sun, sensitive nervous systems require certain emotional conditions to flourish. You thrive where people speak honestly, not perform. Silence is allowed to breathe. Questions are welcomed. Feelings are not rushed to resolution. Complexity is not treated as a flaw. Listening is valued more than winning. And pain is met with curiosity, not correction. When you enter such spaces, something happens inside your body before your mind understands. Your breath deepens, your shoulders drop, your thoughts slow. You speak without rehearsing. You laugh without guarding. You feel less like a problem that needs managing and more like a human who belongs. At first, choosing these environments may feel unfamiliar. You may confuse calm with boredom. You may mistrust kindness that has no edge. You may feel exposed without chaos because your system learned to associate connection with tension. But safety has a different texture. It is quieter, less dramatic, less intoxicating, more real. And as you spend time in spaces that honor depth, you begin to change. You stop explaining yourself so much. You stop minimizing your perceptions. You stop apologizing for needing time. You stop pretending that surface level connection is enough. You begin to value quality over quantity, resonance over approval, truth over popularity. And you realize something tender and powerful. Your sensitivity was never meant to survive everywhere. It was meant to belong somewhere. You were not designed for constant noise. You were designed for meaning, for real conversation, for honest presence, for the kind of connection that does not require you to shrink. And when you finally allow yourself to choose places and people that can hold your depth, you stop feeling like too much. You start feeling like yourself. And that quiet recognition becomes a form of healing. Last, and number 5 important thing, use your sensitivity deliberately for most of your life. Your sensitivity has been something that happened to you. It arrived before you invited it. It reacted before you could choose. It absorbed before you could protect. It pulled you into other people's emotions, other people's conflicts, other people's pain. It woke you in the night with thoughts that were not urgent, made ordinary moments feel heavy and small moments feel enormous. It brought beauty into your life, but also exhaustion, so you learned to endure it, to manage it, to survive it. But sensitivity was never meant to be a constant emergency system. It is a form of intelligence, a refined perception, a deep listening that goes beyond sound. When left unconscious, it becomes overwhelm. When chosen consciously, it becomes direction. To use your sensitivity deliberately means You stop letting it be a door that everything walks through. You become the one who decides. You begin to notice how your attention shapes your inner world. How what you focus on quietly becomes what you carry. How every story you absorb, every mood you sit inside, every problem you try to solve leaves a trace in your body. So you learn to ask gentle questions. Is this worthy of my energy? Is this mine to hold? Is this necessary for me to feel? You start to treat your awareness the way one would treat light, guiding it, not scattering it. You discover that your depth can be aimed toward creating instead of rescuing, toward understanding instead of fixing, toward meaning instead of urgency. You notice how different life feels when your sensitivity is given a purpose. When you write, something inside you organizes. When you listen without trying to repair, people soften. When you build something honest, your nervous system steadies. When you speak truth gently, rooms change shape. You realize that your sensitivity does not only detect pain, it also recognizes what is false, what is empty, what is misaligned, what is quietly harmful. It becomes a compass, not loud, not dramatic, accurate. You begin choosing where to place your care. You may still feel deeply, but not indiscriminately. You stop volunteering your nervous system for every crisis. You stop confusing intensity with importance. You stop believing that exhaustion means you are doing something meaningful. Instead, you begin protecting your energy so it can be used well, on work that matters, on people who are capable of receiving it, on conversations that open rather than drain, on causes that reduce suffering instead of feeding chaos. And something subtle shifts in your identity. You are no longer the one who is too sensitive. You are the one who sees clearly. You are no longer the one who carries everything. You are the one who chooses. Your emotions become signals, not commands. Your empathy becomes insight, not obligation. Your depth becomes contribution, not weight, and slowly, the story of your life changes. You are no longer organized around avoiding pain. You are organized around creating meaning. You still feel the world, but now you shape it too. Not through force, not through noise, but through quiet precision, through presence, through attention, through care that is intentional. That is when sensitivity stops being a wound and becomes a form of leadership. You were never broken. You were perceptive in a world that was loud, soft in a world that was rushed, deep in a world that stayed shallow. You were not too sensitive. You were early. You were gifted. And now you get to use that gift consciously, not to survive, but to shape the kind of life that finally feels like home.